has been a long time coming. I've been talking about wanting to return to Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Trials and Tribulations for years. This is one of my all-time favorite games, but I haven't played this since, I believe, since before the 6th game came out. And there's a reason for that. I played this game to death. I've done like several playthroughs. I know basically every line. Even after all this time, I still find myself like knowing exactly what to present and like how each case proceeds. It's been like almost a decade, and I'm still just like completely in love with this game. A part of me really felt that going back into this, after playing so many other mystery games, I would kind of feel that like I had fallen off of it or that I don't love it anymore, especially after playing the first 2 Ace Attorney games. This is what happens whenever I replay the first 2 games, is that like I feel as if the first 2 games aren't as good, that they don't really build up to the 3rd game very well, that like there's all these weird decisions with the characterizations and the plots and not really like doing a good job building up to the finale. And then when you get to Trials and Tribulations, they take the formula, everything good about the first 2 games, and just make something spectacular out of it. My take has always been that the first 2 games aren't really that special, but the 3rd game is. And honestly, I honestly am at the point now where I recommend people to like start with this 3rd game, because it is the only game in the series, I feel like, that has incredibly good pacing throughout, 5 really good cases to get through, all of which tie together into a cohesive plot that shows the best the series has to offer. Other games might have better cases, especially like, 5 and 6. They may be longer, they may be more elaborate, there may be more mechanics and gimmicks and things like that. But I think Trials and Tribulations really nails what Ace Attorney should be about, which is like a character-driven mystery series that really emphasizes its unique qualities and themes. Ace Attorney is not a realistic game. It is not meant to like realistically recreate like courtroom dramas or anything like that. But that's part of what makes it so fun. It's one of those things that like you just kind of roll your eyes at, like, oh, a real lawyer plays Ace Attorney, like, oh, that wouldn't happen in real life. Like that's the point, It's meant to be exaggerated, it's meant to be fun, and that's what makes it great. This is why the series has endured so long after its initial debut. It is very unique, very distinct, incredibly charming, and honestly has some of my favorite characters in video game history. This is, I would say, one of my all-time favorite adventure mystery games. Like, this game really makes you laugh, gets you engaged, comes up with all these interesting scenarios, and above all, just makes you really think about like what everything is building up to. Like, all the way up to the end, the game just constantly delivers just 10 out of 10, just engaging, fun mystery writing. And the best part of this is, unlike other Ace Attorney games, that also extends to the first case. For the first Ace Attorney games, they tend to have this tendency of treating the first case like a tutorial, like you have to be taught how to play the game, that like, this is a new genre, a new thing, a new concept, and like they kind of had to like teach you how the game works. I started with Trials and Tribulations, this one, and I can tell you just how difficult it is trying to learn how the game works for the first time when you have no experience with the earlier entries in the series. But if you go into this game blind, if you go into it like with no expectations, you'll find yourself just really, really baffled by just how high quality it all is, and just how engaging it is, and just how like fresh, original, and exciting it is. And I think this is why 3-1 is one of my first cases in the series. It's not that difficult. It's not that complex. The culprit is kind of obvious if you think about it for 2 seconds, but if you go into it with no expectations, if you don't know how Ace Attorney games typically play out, what you get is a really good introductory case, which does ease you into the mechanics while still being a really engaging, fresh introduction to the series, the games, its mechanics, and its characters. 3-1, I think, is the best possible example of a tutorial case, in which it sets up what is going to happen for the rest of the game, who the major players are, the themes and ideas, like the core conflict of the game, and it just builds on that in subsequent cases. It's not very difficult, but the things that happen in this case really get you fired up for what you're going to see going forward. And I think that's what makes it so spectacular. Fans even today will tell you that like Dahlia Hawthorne remains one of the best antagonists in the series history, and I would go one step further and say she's probably one of my favorite female video game antagonists ever. Like, purely because this is a kind of feminine evil, like Dahlia Hawthorne is manipulative, she's undermining, she uses others for her own gain, and you see this like play out in the courtroom, like even just seeing how she acts and how she treats other people, you can see right through her shtick very early on. But it is very subtle. I believe, like my first time playing it, I don't remember exactly. I do believe, playing this for the first time, that I didn't really fall for her in that sense, but I did underestimate the lengths she would go to get to what she wanted, how much of a sinister character she actually is. And even more so, now that I'm older and more experienced, just how well written and engaging this character actually is. And I do think that is the secret ingredient as to what makes 3-1 so spectacular, is that it introduces this completely new character that we've never seen before and does things with her that you would like never ever expect in this sense. It's so exaggerated, so cartoonish, and yet like feels kind of real. And I think that's kind of what makes Ace Attorney so spectacular, is that like it's fantastic, it's exaggerated, but it's very much like grounded in reality, because you can totally see someone like this existing. And what's more, not only does she exist, she has relationships with other characters. She manipulates people. She uses them. And, Mia, the protagonist, is someone who has been gunning for this bitch for a long time, and you really get to see this rivalry play out in court. And when it's all resolved, Dahlia gets put at the end of a rope. It's just so satisfying to see, but at the same time, there's this feeling that like, ooh, she's gonna come back. She even teases her return. And like, for the subsequent cases, you're thinking like, when's she gonna come back? How is this circle going to circle around? Like, is she gonna break out of prison? And like, the actual explanation as to what happens is so out there and insane, you really can't explain it to people unless they actually play through the game themselves. It's really one of those plots. It's really completely unique and original, and really should be celebrated for its creativity. I would put this up there with like, Harry Potter in that regard, where it's just such a fantastic concept, but makes perfect sense in context of the story. Like, and I do think that's how you kind of have to approach Ace Attorney in this regard. It is a fantasy, it is a courtroom drama, but it does have fantasy elements, and that's kind of what sets it apart from like its competitors. Like, this is something that really relishes in its supernatural nature, and like it's larger than life, and that's what makes it so engaging. That's what makes it so special, and something that really should be celebrated. And enjoyed for years to come. And I do think it's safe to say, considering how these games have stayed relevant over the past 20 years. These have to be some of the most enduring Game Boy Advance games there are. These are titles that didn't even launch in the West when they first released, right? Like, they had to be ported over to the DS and then localized. And they became, like, huge hits anyway. People still look back on these games fondly. And even though they're not the new hot thing anymore, the series is in a bit of a rut and hasn't had a new entry in about a decade. But even under these conditions, these are still games that, like, still get parodied and referenced even today, even by people who clearly aren't hardcore fans. These games are like super. This game in particular is just very special to me personally, and I'm very, very interested in seeing like if this game has a resurgence of popularity in recent years, because we've seen like over time just how like these kind of mystery series kind of have these long-standing appeals. Columbo is a really good example. I grew up, seeing the shows on TV or whatever, didn't watch them at all, didn't know anything about them, and as an adult, I recognized them and went back and realized just how well written and engaging they were, and how good of a period piece they are. In Ace Attorney's case, I do think it's safe to say, especially for this specific entry, that these are absolutely the best games in this specific genre. Like adventure mystery or whatever you want to call it. I've seen people call it visual novels, but I don't think that label really fits because there's too much gameplay in them. I consider Ace Attorney to be an adventure game series, but there's no getting around this, that like Ace Attorney is, I think, like the peak of the genre. Every other attempt at like kind of overtaking it, whether it's like, indie releases aping the formula or like knockoffs like Danganronpa, like none of them really come close to this. And all of them tend to have like some kind of insane gimmick to get people to come in, like, oh, Danganronpa, it's edgy, like that's kind of the mindset. Like Ace Attorney, in a sense, is like a lot more pure than that. It's a lot more fixated on like the actual mystery. The writing is better, the characters are better, like the mechanics are better. Like it all just comes together to create something that's just so far beyond like the rest of its contemporaries that like the rest of the industry hasn't even really caught up with it yet. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to like Ocarina of Time. It's kind of the Ocarina of Time of its genre. Like, in a lot of ways, like, this game really can't be topped because Ace Attorney was an innovator in this genre at the time. This game was an extraordinary achievement in storytelling at the time. And nothing else has ever really reached those same heights. Even today, at these games as old as they are, I still come back to them and just relish in how well made and engaging they are. And by the time you get to Trials and Tribulations, like you really start to feel as if like the creators just put together, like everything just came together and they just produced something spectacular. The first two Ace Attorney games have their problems for sure. I have issues with like the pacing and like how short they are and stuff like that. Like Trials and Tribulations at its core is fundamentally a perfect game. It accomplishes everything the developers wanted to do. It's like the perfect refinement of the formula, and it's an excellent example of just how developers can learn and grow over time to refine a concept into something that's never really been done before. Ace Attorney Trials and Tribulations is a fantastic experience, and this first case is only a glimpse of what's to come.